Say the line, Bart!
You need a high IQ to watch Rick and Morty.
Howdy friendos, if you haven't seen it yet, this is my second video essay dissecting pop culture characters and using the very broad yet somehow extremely specific lens of alignment charts from Dungeons & Dragons. By the way, before we begin, I would like to give a huge thank you to our executive producer Takoa, who helped me research this episode. There was a pretty big hiccup in this process that delayed the video pretty immensely, but thanks to him, I managed to get it all sorted out. That being said, I would also like to thank him because now I have a great scapegoat if anything goes wrong. If at any point in the video I make a mistake, go ahead and say, "Gosh dang it, Takoa," in the comments section, and then proceed to explain what he got wrong in gruesome detail. If this video is perfect and totally correct, be sure to say, "Great job, Stuart, you did it again, you son of a gun," and then please go ahead and tell me how handsome I am. I'm sure it's a good idea to make fun of our executive producer in the video, right?
You're fired.
In this video, we'll be looking at the words and actions of Rick Sanchez and trying to determine what alignment he would be classified under with those terms. However, unlike in the Shrek video, this is not going to be a straightforward process. I know we made that high IQ joke earlier, but this is actually kinda true. Examining the show with any sort of critical eye requires some research. You see, Rick and Morty operates under the multiverse theory, and while many shows in pop culture do have a greater multiverse in play, Rick and Morty is one of the few rare shows where the multiverse plays a vital role in the plot narrative. Nearly anything can happen anytime, anywhere. One universe can be perfectly normal just like ours, while another universe has chairs that act like people and people that act like chairs. There is literally an infinite number of universes within Rick and Morty's multiverse, and with this, things can get complicated. Rick and his family are privy to and bear witness to some pretty messed up stuff within the Rick and Morty multiverse. Because of this, the alignment of our titular character is immensely affected. Rick thinks that nothing matters in his universe because even if he dies, or if Morty dies, or if a whole universe dies, almost nothing will change. By the way, this particular brand of philosophical apathy is called nihilism, and it will be driving a great deal of how we will be rating Rick's decisions on our morality scale. And the show seems to support this as well because there's an episode in the series where Rick and Morty accidentally mutilate the entire population of Earth. But rather than fix the problem of their world, they decide to pack their bags and leave to another timeline where they didn't ruin everyone's lives and replace a different Rick and Morty that had just died. Rick even lampshades this in the final episode of season 3 by telling the president that they change universes
like hermit crabs.
However, what I just described means that we will be having more than one Rick Sanchez to look at, which means that we're going to want to analyze one specific Rick. Once we pick this Rick, we're going to want to study his habits, behaviors, and treatment of others, and we want a real good look at what his true alignment will be. But not just any Rick will do. We're going to want the best Rick possible. The real Rick. The big cheese. Or
The rickiest Rick there is.
and if we want the rickiest Rick-tasterpiece of them all, there's no better candidate than Rick C-137. If we're going to examine C-137, we're going to need to identify which episodes star him. This is where our job is going to get tricky. Some episodes, like Tales from the Citadel, don't focus on our Rick at all, and because of that, things get a little odd. Now, I will admit I am not the biggest Rick and Morty expert out there. My research was done over the course of a few days by scouring subreddits and other fan forums, and
Takoa.
I have come to a consensus of what episodes we believe our Rick is the main protagonist. Now, there is a real chance that I may have missed an episode thinking that Rick C-137 doesn't appear, when he actually does appear. The reverse may also be true. Once again, if I do make this mistake, you know who to blame.
God damn you!
Takoa.
It's been
Well, this is embarrassing. So I scoured the internet for days looking for information and concrete evidence that could lead us to the correct information. And what did I find? A bunch of half-baked theories and inconsistent information. I don't know what to tell ya. I thought I was onto something earlier, but either I don't have a high enough IQ to understand Rick and Morty, or this is just a comedy show and I'm a fool for trying to put so much thought into it.
The answer is don't think about it.
From what I could tell, nearly every episode of the show's stars are Rick C-137. There are a few exceptions that people believe might be different characters, but it's not really known to us. Common theories include episodes that include Mr. Poopy Butthole, episodes where Rick is a cyborg, or even episodes where Rick breaks the fourth wall are supposedly hints that this is a different Rick, but All of these episodes where these happen have inconsistencies that can't disprove that C-137 is either in these episodes or not. So as far as we know, we're going to have to assume that every episode minus the Rick Lantis mix-up feature our Rick. In that regard, we will not be counting that episode, nor either of the interdimensional cable, nor Morty's mind blowers, since Rick doesn't play an active role in those episodes. Now that we have our episodes picked out, let's go ahead and pick out Rick's starting alignment. Now, the show has yet to reveal Rick's entire backstory. Instead, we only get snippets based on what we see in flashbacks throughout the 3 seasons. According to the show, Rick was something of a terrorist. In his past, he opposed the galactic government and has, according to Bird Person, committed many atrocities. In fact, looking at just any random clip of Rick and Morty, it's pretty easy to conclude that Rick definitely exists within the chaos side of the spectrum, considering how random he tends to act and how impulsive he is. However, now we need to determine if he is evil, neutral, or good. All right. So we need to determine whether Rick's starting alignment is either neutral or evil. And this, my viewers, is where the important distinction of Rick's nihilistic philosophy comes into play that we mentioned near the beginning of the video. Based on Rick's alcoholism, some reveals later in the series, and by the words of many of his friends, Rick is constantly in great pain and he uses adventures and his vices to mask or cover up whatever he's going through. He commits great atrocities, but there's an underlying hint that he did this for good reasons based on what we've learned about the totalitarian control of the galactic government, but it's impossible to know based on what has been revealed so far. It is entirely possible that Rick is evil, driven mad by what he has done and is now taking his pain out through evil acts. However, in my opinion, it is much more likely that Rick is completely amoral and does what he does now as a means of fulfilling his now empty life. To me, it's the distinction between a drug addict and a drug dealer. Being addicted to drugs is not evil. However, taking advantage of an addict in order to extort money from them while slowly killing them with your product is most certainly evil. However, that intent subclause will only go so far. If the action is heinous enough, we will definitely be marking it as evil. There's only so far we can defend some of his actions. With that being said, let's take a look at Rick C-137's actions throughout the series to see if he has any sort of alignment shift from his chaotic neutral beginnings.
Wait a minute, what? Away we go!
Starting alignment, chaotic neutral. Rick freezes a school bully to get Morty for adventure. Literally any other method could have been easier, and he forces Morty to smuggle seeds in an extremely unnecessarily uncomfortable way. Chaotic evil. Rick uses the dream device to encourage dogs to go elsewhere. Chaotic good.
Welcome, Morty. Welcome to Anatomy Park.
Rick builds a park and 2 people at their expense. This park doesn't seem to hurt anyone though, and he did seem to get their consent. Chaotic neutral, I guess? Rick destroys a bunch of con artists who tried to trick him and Jerry. Neutral. Rick validates Morty's adventure and kills a no-map. Neutral good. Rick bails on a universe realizing he can't live there anymore. Despite there being another universe where he could have taken that and fixed everything, his laziness doomed the universe and then he refuses to fix it after mucking it up. Also, the potion that started it all was made to roofie an underage girl. You might be able to argue that this is chaotic neutral since Rick didn't initially want any of this, but since Rick is fully capable of fixing it, I am going to be labeling it as chaotic evil. Rick goes to the Gazorpazort planet and humiliates the Matriarchy Society. Chaotic neutral. Rick messes with the devil for 30 minutes, then beats the shit out of him once he screws over Summer. Chaotic good. Rick proves his innocence to the Council of Ricks and reaffirms his Morty. Could be argued as chaotic neutral, but since he's being nice to Morty, I'm going to say that this is a good action. Chaotic good. Rick throws a wild party, nearly destroying his home. Chaotic neutral. However, afterwards, he uses his weird sci-fi time magic to fix everything and bond with his family. So neutral, good? Rick willingly sacrifices himself for Morty. Granted, he manages to save himself afterwards, but it doesn't negate the attempt. Neutral good. This one is tricky to classify. Rick inadvertently causes the death of dozens of creatures in an attempt to help Morty and Fart. He does say it feels good about helping out someone else, however, but I'm going to say this attempt at least is chaotic good, despite the downer ending. Rick parties with a hive mind life form. He gets noticeably uncomfortable at unnecessary death, but does nothing to improve anyone's lives. Chaotic neutral.
Now let's go, Morty. We've got a lot of friends and family to exterminate.
Okay, hear me out. Rick could literally kill everyone and then move to another reality. But instead, he risks death in order to save his family. Lawful good.
We're going to look into it. You guys hold tight.
Rick, of his own accord, volunteers to save the planet. He doesn't really take it too seriously, though, but he does get to do it. I would say neutral good. Rick threatens and enslaves an entire microverse to power his car battery. It could be argued as neutral evil, but the extra step he took to beat the crap out of Zeep would classify this to me as chaotic evil.
Class dismissed. Coach Ferratu's presence was discovered by the humans.
Rick kills a vampire, helps Beth and Jerry's marriage, and in general does a bunch of nice things for other people. Weirdly, lawful good. Rick helps overthrow a corrupt government. Chaotic good. Rick turns himself into prison to save his family. Lawful good.
Oh, it gets darker, Morty. Welcome to the darkest year of our adventures.
This episode is really hard to pin down. Rick is such an unreliable narrator that he could very well be lying to Morty during the end of the episode rant. He could either be messing with Morty, drunk, trying to cover up his own feelings, or any number of things. However, since this is what we end the episode on, and I can't prove anything otherwise, I'll say taking down the galactic government, causing the death of possible thousands, and ruining his own family's dynamic. All for Szechuan sauce? Chaotic evil?
I want that McNugget sauce. 'Cause it can do this.
I would have considered this a lawful good act since Rick gave up the stone that was able to power the neighborhood. However, since he took it at the last second before leaving that reality, I'm going to classify it as chaotic evil.
No! I turned myself into a pickle, Morty! Boom!
Rick turns himself into a pickle to get out of therapy. Chaotic neutral. Rick gets smashed and directly causes the death of most of the heroes in the galaxy. Granted, their acts were questionable to begin with, and sure, Rick was drunk, but... Nah, man. He brutally murdered a bunch of people. Chaotic evil. Rick and Jerry part on good terms. Despite the fact that Jerry conspires to have killed them, Rick still lets it go. Chaotic good.
That's something. You were right. Best day spa in the galaxy.
Rick and Morty decide to make the healthy decision for themselves and others. Rick ends up saving the world and being generally a helpful person. Chaotic good.
Hey, you want to help?
Okay.
Rick helps Beth find herself and saves an innocent man from execution. Neutral good. Rick messes with the president for like 40 minutes and then fixes all of his problems for him. Not out of any love for the US, but because he wants to be left alone and moving is a bitch and a half. He also tricks the president with fly fishing Rick so that he can stay with his family rather than killing Jerry. I'm not sure how to label this, but since he's doing it out of love for his family, I'm gonna say chaotic good?
Family now. In many ways, things will be like season 1, but more streamlined.
So, Rick, according to our video, starts off as chaotic neutral and ends up at almost chaotic good? Are you serious? Well, yeah, actually. Look, I understand if you guys disagree with some of the choices I made, sure, but I think chaotic good or mostly chaotic good really suits Rick. No, really, let's take a look at him for a second. On the internet, most of the discourse surrounding Rick is either about his backstory or his philosophy or the message of the show, but it's the human element of Rick that tends to go missing. Let's take a look at Rick one more time and ask ourselves the question, why? Some people ask this, sure, but really looking at Rick's behavior, I think his personality is more simple than we're giving him credit for. Now, everyone knows his catchphrase.
That's the way the news goes. Hit the sack, Jack. Uh-oh, somersault jump. AIDS!
Okay, yeah, he's got too many catchphrases, sure. But let's point out the big one that the series really wants us to notice. The
Wubba-lubba-dub-dub!
which according to Bird Person means,
I am in great pain. Please help me.
and while this doesn't go unnoticed by fans, a lot of people just kind of brush it off. This might be controversial to say, but I think Rick has always been chaotic good. This whole video might have accidentally been a complete moot point, but based around his behavior throughout the series, at points, it kind of points to it. To quote a great movie with another great chaotic character,
4 or 5 moments, that's all it takes.
To
Be a hero.
In my opinion, there are a few big moments that really define Rick's personality. First one that comes to mind is during A Wrinkle in Time. Rick, understanding that he is likely to die, gives up his collar to save Morty. The fact that he attempts to make peace with his death until he realizes that he wants to live is actually more powerful than if he just gave it up selflessly. Despite valuing his own life immensely, he values Morty even more. This is more than just a good act, it's noble and inspired by love. Second, during autoerotic assimilation, Rick witnessed a town get destroyed. His immediate gut reaction is shock and panic. He got no joy out of seeing senseless death and destruction. But once realizing the general populace was okay, the very next thing he asked was,
My grandkids weren't in that town, right? Are my grandkids alive?
showing again that while Rick is abusing substances for selfishness and numbing his pain in any way he can, he has one foot in the door firmly for his family. Now, you might also be asking, what about the Mad Max dimension, or the microverse, or any of those other crazy examples where he clearly did evil things? Well, yeah, that's a good point. And those actions are definitely evil. There's no excuse for it. But that actually isn't out of alignment for a chaotic character. He cares more about individuals than societies or groups. And all of these things are bad. There really isn't a good excuse for Rick in some of these. He definitely does some messed up stuff, but I want to take a look at an episode I didn't cover originally, and that's Morty's Mind Blowers. I didn't originally cover this episode because it's a series of flashbacks and there's no way to determine in what order these events actually happened, and in doing that, that kind of messes up our chart a bit. So there you go. The one thing that really stuck out to me was when the Floopian, these alien names, when the Floopian appeared before Rick and asked him to kill him. Rick then explains about the afterlife. During this time, Rick doesn't mock him for his religion. Instead, he shows him respect and asks him specifically on how he would like to die, and even offered him the most quick and painless method. They even go and share a last meal. If you weren't paying attention, you might even think this is out of character for Rick, but really it's not. Allow me to get sidetracked for just a second to talk about one of my old favorite series, Rurouni Kenshin. To those that don't know, Rurouni Kenshin is a show about a man named Kenshin Himura. In his past, he was a mass murderer, an assassin, with a complicated history. He killed countless people in order to overthrow a corrupt government and to bring about an era of progress and peace. Sound familiar? Throughout the series, it's revealed that Kenshin hates his past and the man that he used to be. In the series proper, he travels around Japan helping everyone he can, even at the sacrifice of his own body and soul. He atones for his past by doing as much good as he can. Now, this is a bit of spoilers, but there's a point in the series where Kenshin's spirit breaks. Due to his past and his inability to fight it off, someone close to him seemingly dies. In response to this, Kenshin becomes a broken bum, hanging out in slums, waiting to die. His friends come in and repeatedly tell him over and over it's not his fault, but nothing moves him. Not until a girl comes up and asks him for help. It's at that moment that Kenshin springs into action and comes back to save the day. Because when it comes right down to it, if you ask for help, Kenshin will provide. Now, we don't know what yet happened in Rick's past. We know from Bird Person that it was
Soaked deeply with the blood of both friends and enemies.
but we have no idea. Rick obviously uses substances to numb his great pain, but look at what happens when his family asks for help. His family that he repeatedly states doesn't matter or that he doesn't care about. Almost every single time, Rick will give his help. Even stupid mundane things that he says are beneath him, Rick will fulfill almost every request asked of him, and I think that's a real core part of his character. Even looking beyond his immediate family, he's helpful to almost everyone, and I think that actually makes Rick a pretty okay guy. You know, provided you don't get in his way, work for the government, or just piss him off. He's quick to forgive and doesn't judge others by their mistakes. He even said himself,
Morty, 20 people try to kill me every week. I end up getting high with half of them. I mean, check it out, Gearhead's here.
he understands that people deserve second chances, and things that already happened have just happened. Let it go.
The answer is don't think about it.
Now, I know the chart that we made doesn't quite land there, but yeah, I think Rick Sanchez is firmly a chaotic good character. I totally understand if you don't agree with this assessment, because looking through it, I genuinely thought I was going to get a chaotic evil protagonist, but yeah, I guess not really. I guess there's nothing left to do now but like and subscribe, baby! Pledge to the Patreon! Share the video!
Lick my balls! Yeah, say that all the time.